Joining me is a former federal Labor politician, Michael Danby, who in Parliament served on committees covering intelligence, security, foreign affairs and cyber safety. Has been a big critic of some of the lines pushed by Bob Carr and Paul Keating on the Labor side. Michael Danby, always great to catch up with you. Defence Minister Peter Dutton has said the Chinese dictatorship would want Labor to win the election. How much truth is there in that provocative claim?
I can't assess that yet, but it's a big picture, Andrew. China is interested in subverting Australia via its United Front organisation. Let's remember they're the villain in all of this. Now, they will try in every way in the kind of hybrid warfare they're playing against Australia to influence not just political donations or political parties, but think tanks and public figures and the most unlikely people, even in state parliaments, who can hold receptions for them in the New South Wales Parliament for South Pacific leaders. There's a whole organised plan that someone is sitting at a ministry in Beijing organising, especially here in Australia. But you're right, Andrew, there's a couple of Labor frontbenchers who received dubious donations from well-known aligned Beijing donors. But if there is a change of government, they'll be balanced out by pragmatic statements of existing leaders who will have to stick to those statements, by the 80% of public opinion who is critical of China, by our vigilant ASIO, by most of the media, and by our allies. So it's a complicated picture. We're all adults. These are things for legitimate concern to see whether Beijing's already got its tentacles into some people, but it's a very wide warfare that they're playing already against Australia, not just in trade and political donations and in the South Pacific, but, you know, they're counting the number of op-eds that are pro-Beijing in, you know, one newspaper. They're balancing the comments of some pro-Beijing past leaders against, you know, the comments of foreign affairs commentators like Greg Sheridan and Peter Harcher. They're trying to shift opinion. They're trying to scare businesses in Australia, and we've got to be very vigilant.
We're seeing it, Michael. We're seeing it. As I said, there were two stories in the last week saying of Chinese business people saying, listen, you're going too soft, too hard on China, going too hard, and a couple saying, oh, we're going to now vote Labor. And I'm wondering if Labor is strong enough to resist the temptation to go soft on China if it's in government. Because for a start, now you mentioned all these competing interests, that's correct. But one of them is that you've got people like former Labor Foreign Minister Bob Carr, former Labor Prime Minister Paul Keating, both saying the Morrison government's too hard on China, going at Labor to try and get softer, and they won't be alone in the party.
Well, Bob Carr's been sort of exposed by most people, and his pro-Beijing think tank, ACRI, has been dropped by the Chinese, who are now much more enthusiastic about another think tank in Washington. But you're right, it's an ongoing warfare. You have to also distinguish, Andrew, between different people. Now, if Paul Keating recommends that Australia be involved in the Asian Development Bank, okay, that is an argument that should be considered in and of itself. But there's a whole lobby of people on both sides of politics. I'm not saying, you know, the donations to the Liberal Party that the Herald Sun highlighted some years ago was responsible for her supporting that failed extradition treaty to China. But they're active, they're everywhere, it's an ongoing warfare, and it's the biggest issue. And I'm so pleased you're focusing on it rather than the endless identity politics we get on the ABC.
Oh, for God's sake.
Sort of mocks the seriousness of these issues. We've got a whole debate about who's being mean to who in some sort of playground or school or something like that. Forget who's being mean to who in a playground. China's being mean to Australia in a very significant way. Anyway, Michael Danby, I'm sorry, I'm out of time, Absolutely.
but I'm going to have you back on this because I suspect
for having me.
This is going to be one of the big challenges of our time.